All right, I'm gonna refresh and we'll see. I'm not seeing it yet.
There's usually a delay. I'm not sure how long it is, and you might just have to refresh too.
Link me it.
Introducing managing moderators have the same capabilities as standard moderators, but in addition, they can manage blocked words and change chat modes even live. Interesting.
I see it. We're live.
Hooray! Yeah, there's.
Okay.
Is there a way I can make you a moderator?
Don't worry about that now. So let's do a proper introduction
Give me
since
one
we're
second.
already
I'm trying
streaming.
to get the chat to show up adequately on my screen, as I've never done this before, so it doesn't have any of the settings.
Yeah, I guess it was all on my end before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I believe I am ready sufficiently. Everything's showing up. We're all talking like we ought to.
There's a bit of a delay, but that's just streaming.
Mm-hmm. So introductions, Koki.
Oh, okay. We're introducing ourselves individually. Hey, I am Koki. I'm a guy who likes to think a lot about historical counterfactuals and alternate history, and I'm here with my friend Silent.
I'm silent. I, among other things, am a philosopher. I am also very slow at speaking, as has probably been able to tell from this. I have many other things that I'm particularly qualified for, but that's probably the most relevant presently.
All right. Well, a show we've been interested in a fair amount is the series Sliders, where the protagonists are sent from world to world, where functionally it is Earth, but it's always different somehow. Either something changed in the past or there's a new aspect of reality.
Answer some other question, but I didn't think of till just now. But streamers always do random stuff anyway. Should we share this to any of the people we know?
I think we should just do this. It's recording anyway, so.
Okay, I was just asking. Um, oh, so yes, the TV series. We've done several episodes presently, which is why we're on to the last days. Kind of going world by world as opposed to episode by episode and talking about the changes to the alternate history. This is more of Koki's specialty, in which he looks at what we know about the world. Sometimes they explicitly say when the original change was, and so in some cases we'd know what the original change was and what the modern day is, and so Koki's like explores what happens in between, as well as other issues. Um, when I am talking, I can't do the game thing because I keep forgetting about it. I'm starting to do the game thing though, and then I do a kind of mild political analysis. I'm not so good on the history aspect. That's Koki, so I can't put it like in its appropriate historical contexts. Um, but it was inspired by our starting was I had run across a comment where people were complaining about the show, fans of the show, especially me, being like it's has a degree leftist messaging in it, and I'm like, no, the show seems really left leaning, and so I wanted to start this in part the exploration of history, and in part express why I think the show is somewhat relatively left leaning. There are some obvious exceptions that we get into periodically.
And honestly, I think this episode in particular is where it's worth noting that how you do alternate history is informed by how you view history. Your politics and the assumptions you have are going to inform how you write hypothetical. No one's unbiased. Everyone has their own bias. Everyone has their own, true or false. Everyone's got propaganda that they believe in. And the premise of this episode does involve a certain amount of apologetics for the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I think that's worth commenting on.
Yeah.
So,
So you want to do like a summary of the episode, or me?
sure, I can do this. So, the sliders, as they call themselves, find themselves in a world where the world is about to end because a meteor is hurtling to, or an asteroid is hurtling towards Earth. And the reason why they are unable to stop this asteroid is.
You had said it
Hmm?
was 2956 Yeomans.
Oh yeah, which is an actual asteroid that exists, though it's not one that has ever threatened Earth. But the reason why they cannot simply stop it is because in this world, nuclear weapons have never been developed. And so we actually see a lot of people just dealing with different ways, dealing with, in their own way, dealing with the fact that they may very well die. And it gives us an interesting glimpse into each person's character. I think it's worth noting that Rembrandt immediately accepts, I'm going to die here. He's angry at Quinn for bringing him to this world and just leaves the group. Wade seems to also be leaning in that direction. Wants to spend her last moments with whatever approximates her family in this world. And Arturo sees the situation and refuses to give up. He thinks there must be some kind of way to save the situation. And granted, this may also be a sense of how qualified he sees himself in actually being able to resolve the situation. Quinn was kind of torn between Arturo and Wade, but ultimately decided to go with Wade. But funnily enough, even while he was with Wade, decided to try to solve the situation. I'm sorry, I've been speaking over you.
Well, just the once, and you were finishing your thought. I would add that there is a potential interesting analysis there as well. Arturo goes off. He's like, I wonder what the world experts are doing, and so he immediately goes to like a conference of them to see like last ditch efforts, what to do, and that's where he meets Conrad Banish and yada yada. We'll get to that. Whereas Cue Ball, as you noticed, torn between the two of them, goes with Wade to find the families. Um, he gets to his house and he notices that he exists. And instead of going and joining Arturo to see what the experts are doing, because his family's not there, by the way, instead of going to Arturo and seeing what the experts are doing, he immediately pulls the situation wholly on himself and is trying to create the sliding device to take just the group of friends out.
Yeah, actually, on the experts of the world, this is a minor possible continuity error. In the beginning, they talk about a meeting of the Union of Concerned Scientists, and then towards the end, they present what they did and arrange it with the Union of Distinguished Scientists. In theory, these could be two different organizations, or it could be a continuity error. I'm inclined to say it was a continuity error. I just thought that was funny. But
I'm
so,
well
go
cooking
ahead.
food presently, so if you need me to chime in as you're doing the summary.
So it's worth noting, despite what the Union of Concerned Scientists versus the Union of Distinguished Scientists is happening, and this is a theme in Sliders. I don't want to undermine your thesis too much when you're talking about Sliders actually has leftist messaging, but I'm going to say I see a lot of right wing libertarian propaganda, and well, we see
I
some of the elites. Well, go ahead before I actually explain what I saw.
Yep. Yeah, the series was created by a libertarian in the 1990s, but I'm not. So I wouldn't say that there's no right wing elements because there's obviously like a at least a degree of right wing among libertarians. And over the course of time, libertarians have gotten significantly more right wing, such that all of the ones I know or had knew of were generally advocates for Trump and MAGA. Um, but at the time, it was significantly more left wing. And as the series goes on as well, there are periods where it becomes even more left wing as the original creator got less involved with the show. There's a particular episode where Quinn is basically lamenting that we don't kill enough fascists, and another episode where Rembrandt is talking about how black people experience violence by the police and not white folks.
Okay, valid, valid. And admittedly, we've only analyzed the first few episodes.
We're on
What I was
episode
going to
two, three now.
we're at least on four. Well, regardless, what I was gonna say, a theme in this episode, or it's not really a theme actually. Here's the fun part: at no point is what the government says taken seriously. But it's worth noting, while certain elites are trustworthy, the scientists and whatnot, the government is lying. The government does have a message being put out that the dust cloud won't be that bad, that it won't be the end of the world, that we should just try not to make too much of a ruckus because it's not going to be as bad as some alarmists are saying, even though we have every reason to believe, and it's just taken for granted that it will be as bad as the papers say, and Arturo and Benish go to great lengths to stop this asteroid from destroying the Earth. So that's always kind of a. I mean, it's kind of a recurring theme. I guess the most egregious might have been the was it fever? I don't know. There was an episode that there was like a pandemic, but actually this was a government psyop, and the government is never a trustworthy entity, at least not yet.
It was episode two or three, Fever, where the government. It's two or three because the first episode is sometimes split up into two episodes, and they're both just called pilot.
Now, another aspect of this is a dichotomy they draw between violent, hedonistic indulgence and upright Christian living. This is clearly something that they're trying to do a contrast with. Some people, well, this is more Rembrandt's art. By the way, I really appreciate that we have three separate plot lines that are occurring concurrently. I think that it was done really well. It flowed really naturally. So let me say something good about this. They don't always split up. In fact, a lot of times they stick together, and that's good. Sometimes you'll see an A plot and a B plot, and they reflect on each other really nicely. In this case, we have three distinct parties that are having their own little adventures, and at no point do you feel like one is taking away from the other. So, as far as an enjoyable episode, I thought this was pretty well done. But going back to Rembrandt's plot, he goes to church and he's like, hey, you can, be of service to the church and be a good Christian man. And Rembrandt's like, nah, it would cramp my style. And so he goes to the riots in the street where they're drugging up some girls and getting naked. And he goes to a mansion full of swingers and people, are riding motorcycles through the mansion. And it's just a party and everyone's having fun. And of course, because everyone's just having fun, they're also playing Russian roulette for some reason. And so the idea of
That's like they accepted death, and so it comes now, it comes 20 minutes from now. They're kind of like, yeah, who cares? It
well,
shows like a
but this is
non.
but they show two different ways to deal with that, right? And I don't think the only two options in my life are go to church and sleep with a man's wife while he shoots himself.
Yeah, I'm just saying that it shows a form of it is nihilism. Not the only form, but just an instance.
Yeah, I've been dancing around the actual history part of this, but I suppose that's really what I'm here to comment on more than anything. Frustratingly, this is another world that probably has more than one point of divergence, and I accept that this is an aspect of not just Sliders, probably most parallel universe fiction. While it is possible that the asteroid being off its course might have had some kind of impact on Einstein that made him want to sabotage the Manhattan Project, but in reality, we're just going to assume that these are two separate things. That the asteroid is plummeting towards Earth, and that Einstein, well, I guess really the government allows Einstein to join. They were kind of afraid of Einstein's communist sympathies, and they were afraid that he might sabotage the project, or at least leak information to communists or something of that nature. And in this world, Einstein did join the project, and exactly that happened. He sabotaged the Trinity project. Oppenheimer, who it's funny in the start of the project was very conflicted on the matter, and as it progressed he made more apologetics for himself in the atomic bomb. But Einstein, Oppenheimer, and Enrico Fermi seem to have crafted this paper that says actually nuclear energy is impossible. And because Einstein sabotaged a detonation device, which seems like a weird thing that he would be working on, the bomb failed. And subsequently, the bomb was never developed. So, obviously, this requires a couple of stretches, but given Einstein and Oppenheimer's sympathies, it's not terribly out there to say that Einstein getting involved in the project could have resulted in this. And as far as Enrico Fermi, he only gets a passing message, but it's worth noting he was initially skeptical of whether or not the atomic bomb was possible. So it's totally plausible that he could write a paper explaining why it's impossible. And while he didn't express regret over what he did specifically, as far as I can tell, he definitely did regret that nuclear warfare was something that was on the table now, and he advocated against making a hydrogen bomb. Though he did work on the hydrogen bomb, he still did his job, but he thought that nuclear warfare was a bad thing. So it's not implausible for him to be in on the conspiracy with Einstein and Oppenheimer. I'm just putting it out there. There are a couple of assumptions in people's characters that are being made, and I guess I want to reiterate there are multiple points of divergence, but Einstein's theory of relativity it did have an astronomical component in proving it. There's a non-zero chance that a asteroid being somewhere else could make him say, "You know what? I'm going to clean up my act, be less overtly communist so that the US government will trust me and, XYZ." I suppose, but this is really just sort of offhand remarks. They don't actually talk too much about the people who did things other than Einstein sabotaged the detonation device. But Benish made a remark that I think is also very telling of where the author is coming from, is that Benish remarks that if the atomic bomb was developed, the Second World War could have ended 5 years sooner, and there would not have had to have been a land invasion of Japan. I've been talking for a bit. What are your thoughts on that assumption?
And that it would have saved thousands of lives.
Yes, and it would have saved thousands of lives. What are your thoughts on that assumption?
I mean, I don't buy it. To my understanding, Japan was relatively near surrender anyway, and I know it's an Onion article, but it kind of gets at the point of it. I think it's like Wilson calls for dropping the second bomb before Japan surrenders uh, because we have it, something
Hmm.
like that. Obviously that's not a historical source by any stretch, but it gets the point across that I'm trying to say. They were uh, actually a threat. We just bombed them kind of because we could show them who's boss. This is what happens when you mess with the U.S. At least that's my understanding of it.
Hmm. So I think it's worth noting what Oppenheimer's rationale was regarding this. Because even after the bomb was made, there were people who were like, we don't actually need to kill people to show we have the bomb. We can detonate a bomb in the ocean and show its destructive power that way. And Oppenheimer remarked that it would be a shame after putting so much work into developing this bomb not to properly use it. Uh, which I think he's a complex character. I think that oftentimes we change our values when our values are dissonant with what we're actually doing. But the U.S. Bombing Commission did make the assessment that both the atomic bombings of Japan, land invasion, and even aligning with the Soviet Union was not necessary for Japan to surrender and ultimately win the war. Now, a lot of people have made apologetics similar to what the Sliders episode is, that if the bombs had not dropped, there would be a land invasion that would be much more costly than what the atomic bombs would have been. What's funny about this is that this assessment is the same assessment that the Japanese military that was controlling the government also had of the situation. They blatantly wanted to goad the U.S. into a costly land invasion where they felt as though they could negotiate terrible term, or not terrible. They could negotiate better terms, and so, but because of the atomic bombings, they ultimately couldn't do this. Now, I'm talking about the military, as opposed to the government, though the military was very much in control of the government. There were certainly many people in the Japanese government, but because of the way the Japanese government was structured, they couldn't really do anything about it with the military people in charge. Is that they were ready to surrender, and it is because of the military, basically keeping them out of any real power that that Japan couldn't surrender, and the bombs did get dropped. Though it's worth noting, this assessment of the Japanese military and the U.S. Bombing Commission both do have a component of "nah, I'd win." You know, I am more inclined to say I believe with the U.S. Bombing Commission that Japan would have surrendered regardless. But I do realize that the exact people who say that, who made that assessment, are the people who are doing conventional bombing and saying, "Yeah, I didn't need those nuclear bombs. We had them. We had them." But could a land invasion have happened if the atomic bombs hadn't been dropped? I think it's possible. I don't think it's necessarily the most likely outcome. But similarly to how the motion to actually drop the bombs went through well after the point that people were like, maybe we don't need this anymore, sometimes stuff gets caught in bureaucracy and it just has enough momentum that it's not stopped. That someone could plan a land invasion, and because no one's like, actually, let's just give Japan some time, or let's do a bit more conventional bombing. And granted, the fire bombings in Tokyo, there were conventional bombings in Japan that are probably even less justified than the nuclear bombs, but that's a whole other conversation. Uh, there, I lost my train of thought for a second. So, it is possible that something could just get caught up in the bureaucracy, and then ultimately, even though no one wants to do it, someone does it. Now, a possible way that this might happen is more of a diplomatic favor. The U.S. had voiced the idea of unconditional surrender. And this was something that was being repeated, and there were a few terms that the Japanese government had offered, saying that we will surrender if the regime gets to be stayed in place, and that Japan is the country that tries all of these war criminals, and basically undermining the whole point of the war, right? That we could just go back to the status quo, and the U.S. government won't actually do anything. And granted, there's something to be said about that. There's also something to be said about the fact that a lot of people just didn't want the emperor to be deposed, which is something that the U.S. never guaranteed per se, but the U.S. ultimately didn't even want to do. And so, perhaps if the U.S. wasn't so locked in on the unconditional surrender, the atomic bombings could be avoided, or if the U.S. was more locked in on the unconditional surrender, uh, a land invasion could have gone through. Because Douglas MacArthur did something a little weird. He did not offer conditions for Japanese surrender, saying, "Oh, we'll give you XYZ," but he made a demand, saying, "The emperor will help us establish a new peaceful government in Japan," which is functionally a guarantee that the emperor will be safe, and that's when Japan surrendered. So, even though it was a way for both of them to save face, right? That the U.S. government can say it was an unconditional surrender, whereas Japan could say that they managed to preserve the emperor. And when in our timeline, when the bombs dropped, the Emperor did cite the bombing as the reason why he had to surrender, that they were new weapons that could destroy the world, and for the sake of preserving the world, he's surrendering. So there certainly is like an argument to say objectively, to save face, the atomic bombings did help Japan come to surrender. And it's worth noting, even with this, even after the bombs, there was a coup and a counter coup in the military to prevent the surrender. So even with the bombing, you know, I'm not going to say it wasn't guaranteed because I feel as though something had to give eventually, but there had to be like coups in the government for surrender to even happen. So, I'm not inclined to say it's completely baseless, but and we are dwelling a lot on reality was a pretty small plot point, but I think from where I'm coming from, the alternate history thing, it is the most important part where how we view history is going to affect how we craft these scenarios. And it's worth noting that Japan was also, at least certain parts of the government were exploring venues of surrender, and the Japanese ambassador was approaching a USSR delegate, and the USSR was basically snubbing them because the USSR did not want Japan to surrender. The USSR wanted to invade Japan and possibly get some stuff. So, I don't think it's a cut and dry scenario, but like I said in the beginning, well, I am sort of steel manning the counterpoint that, hey, maybe there was an aspect of truth to this. I'm inclined to say no, no. There may have been some kind of more radical coup in Japan that would have had to have happened, but I think that the situation where the military has been steering the government was unsustainable, and that someone would eventually stop these madmen from. Oh my god! Even after the atomic bombings, there's a whole okay. We absolutely have to surrender. The military leader at the time was like, "But wouldn't it be beautiful if Japan went up in flames like a flower?" These people were nuts. And again, when he agreed to surrender, he was overthrown because there were enough crazy people in the military to want to keep the war going. But I'm both sidesing it, but I am generally inclined to agree with you that atomic bombings were not necessary, and that this is propaganda that I kind of wish didn't exist in this Sliders episode. But I have been talking entirely too long. I want more of your thoughts.
Well, I mean, you're summarizing the episode, so I don't really
Okay,
have.
don't defend me. Just let's move on.
Yeah, no steel man Koki. But no, I don't really have too much in the way of additional thoughts. As noted prior, history is really not one of my strong points. The extent of thoughts I have is that you know mass murder is generally not a good thing.
Hot take, I know. Okay, well, how more on the moral messaging then, or the philosophy, or I mean, I guess I'm talking a little bit about philosophy in terms of historiography and how.
Yeah, the part asking for the summary due to the viewers most likely not having watched the show, or if they have and it hasn't been a lot, they'd have an understanding of how the whole show went down. Um,
Okay, well, the long and short of it is Rembrandt goes to church, decides no churches for squares, goes to a bunch of ravers and swingers that are ultimately culminates in playing Russian roulette, and then he's like, actually, no, I need Jesus, and he goes back to church. In the case of Quinn and Wade, they
it wasn't much about Jesus. I think it was more I actually want to help people and just instead of just indulging in my vices like this
Fair enough. I
He
mean,
also saved the guy's
I
wife.
think he did not. He gave the gun back in the end.
He took the guy's
Oh, he
wife.
saved the guy's wife. Oh, I see. Admittedly, I don't think she was. There was a scene that was ambiguous, right? Her husband was. It was her turn to. Or it was his turn to pull the trigger on the Russian roulette, and she's like, "This is we should stop." And then he's like, "You know, you could do this for me." And he does sort of a pistol motion pointing at her. He's like, "You know, you always wanted to." And I'm inclined to say that he was asking her to shoot him rather
Oh,
than her to take his place and shoot herself. What was
I
that?
see. I had not considered that before.
I think it's a little ambiguous. I do realize that both interpretations are valid. Just when I was going to say Rembrandt saved someone's life, that's why I'm inclined to say no. At least my reading does show he did not. Uh,
I
but
only show in which he didn't save her life.
yeah, there was something else I was gonna say about that. I don't remember. It'll probably come back in this rambling little thing we're doing. But ultimately, that's his arc. He goes to the church and then meets up with everyone and finds out the Earth is saved. In the case of Wade and Quinn, Wade's family had moved away. Quinn's house is still there, but his family's not there. And then he realizes, hey, maybe I have sliding equipment. And even though this Quinn was different, he seems to have had a hobby for dinosaurs. He still was working in theoretical physics and built a sliding machine when trying to make a time machine, actually, because he wanted to see dinosaurs. Which is kind of. Oh, go ahead.
Opposed to, I'm just going to call him R. Quinn, who who accidentally created a sliding machine because he wanted to create artificial gravity for space travel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny that they both.
Machine, which I guess is also for space travel. I just screwed up which my words were.
I do find it interesting that neither made a sliding machine on purpose. Ultimately, he was trying to make it into a proper sliding machine. He failed. To be honest, I feel like this should have been the resolution of Quinn and Wade's.
Romance arcs.
Yes, because it just gets weird after this point. Like, there's a fake out kiss, and then they kiss for real. They admit to each other's feelings, except, it's never just like they're an established couple now.
Yeah, it's a constant will they won't they, even though they did.
Yeah, exactly. They did. There's no will they, won't they? Uh, Granted, some people feel that way about like the first episode of Kaguya-sama Love is War, and I'm inclined to say no. But at least as far as I'm concerned, Quinn and Wade, they did. There's no will they, won't they. Arturo lets Quinn know about his progress in making a nuclear bomb and ultimately recruits Quinn for that, and Quinn participates in sort of saving the day. Arturo, even though he's probably the most relevant of the plot lines, I guess I saved for last. He encountered this timeline's Benish, who said that the asteroid could be prevented from hitting Earth via atomic weapons.
He
And
was uninvited, but burst into the meeting anyway. Like, you didn't think about nuclear weapons. And then the guy at front is all like, these three people definitively prove that there is not enough
uranium.
visible material to successfully be capable of constructing one.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that got Arturo up to speed. And he was asking, like, basic questions like, oh, and because of the failure of the Trinity experiment. Nuclear weapons were never developed. Benish says you're not much of a physicist if you don't know that. That's not a physics question. That's a history question. But I understand how it's relevant to physics. But also, that's an incredibly weird thing for someone to say. What was that?
It's like so relevant to the field or knowing about the field. It's like, yeah, we don't have nuclear weapons. Jeez.
I'm just gonna say it's not even about you're not much of a physicist. It is a weird question to ask in general. Of like, if I encountered someone on the streets that's like, wait, are you saying that we've developed these atomic weapons that can cause massive amounts of destruction and also harness them for energy in these nuclear power plants? I'd be like, what's wrong with you? These are known things. These are not things someone needs to say. Um,
The United States of America? The United
yes. You mean to tell me that Europeans came here and displaced all of the indigenous people on this continent? What are you on, man?
What planet are you
But
from?
yeah, exactly. Also, the plot point of nuclear weapons stopping an asteroid, I don't think nuclear weapons would even meaningfully deflect an asteroid of that size. I think we tend to overestimate the power of nuclear weapons. Now, granted, if they had fired an atomic weapon at the asteroid much, much earlier, they could kind of knock it off course a bit so it doesn't hit Earth. But I don't think that we have something. Hmm?
I think that's where most, present attempts actually advocate is like we found it sufficiently soon enough, we can make it bugger off.
Yeah, and even then, we could use conventional bombs. I remember someone suggesting like giant white paintballs because if they're more reflective, the sun would actually do the job of pushing them away. There's lots of stuff that could have been done besides launching a nuke, and even if you do manage to completely somehow destroy this bomb when it is already this close to Earth. Uh, the momentum is still pushing all of this mass towards Earth. It's just in multiple pieces.
Everybody gets a
But,
taste instead of one getting all the taste.
well, the amount of dust that would be kicked up and destroy all life on Earth would be the same. But this is a plot concession. Okay, obviously people have their own perceptions of history, and that affects how they do history, and also people have their own perceptions about physics, and that affects how they do science fiction. Uh, And I am not a scientist, so maybe someone's cringing at everything I said. But I'm pretty sure that
Let
the
us know in the comments and also why we're wrong.
right. Um, also, the whole like Arturo saying things that are entirely too obvious that it's just weird for someone to say. Uh, when uh Benish talked about Fat Boy. Well, first, Arturo kind of hesitates, or not hesitates, does a bit of a double take because he thought this was an insult towards him personally, and Benish clarifies that's the name of the bomb. Arturo says it was called Fat Man, you blistering idiot. I'm sorry, Arturo, this is not your world. Like, it's one thing that you could be like, wasn't it called Fat Man? But the fact that you are so confidently wrong that you are fucking insulting this guy, it's like, bruh, what's wrong with you, bruh? You know that this is a different world and that things are going to be different. Um, on the Trinity bomb, though, while it was the same model as Fat Man in our timeline, it was not called that. It there was I think it was initially called something like Project Jumbo, and then later on the name The Gadget stuck, and that's what it was called. I'm not saying that the name Fat Boy couldn't have come later, even in a timeline where they never dropped this model of bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or no, Nagasaki. Fat Man was Nagasaki, I believe. If you're a World War II historian, tell me how wrong I am. It is kind of weird that it's called Fat Boy and not just the Gadget or Jumbo, but that's something that I thought was kind of weird. Also, this is very 90s. I want to comment on how much in the 90s this show is set and how much in the 90s this show. Huh?
It's egregiously 90s.
They're at the TV store, and Arturo's like, "Is that computer on the internet?" Which is not a thing people say. But also, when they're like, "Okay, we need supplies for the nuclear bomb," Arturo calls 411 and starts talking to the operator. Um,
Nuclear missile.
actually, I was thinking about Back to the Future when Marty McFly is talking to Doc about building the time machine in the 60s, and the guy's like, I'm sure in the 1980s, plutonium is readily available, but in the 60s, it's a little hard to come by. I think in the 90s, even in a world where people aren't using it for nuclear power, uranium would be a little difficult to come by. But whatever, they made it work. They're both academics, and so maybe they have connection. They certainly have connections that we wouldn't. But I just find it hilarious that what was that?
Arturo is the head of the, or maybe not head, but a well respected individual within the physics department at the fictional university he teaches at.
Wait. Are you telling me that Arturo might have done like academic stolen valor of the Arturo of this universe?
Wait, you might have to. I'm not following.
In this universe, Arturo was not that.
Do we know anything
Unless
about
he
Arturo in
was.
this universe?
Well, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if he did do it, then it would kind of be stolen valor, right? Because he didn't go to school in this universe. He wasn't a professor in this universe. I guess he could assume the identity of the Arturo in this universe if the Arturo in this universe was also a professor. But it was more of a joke that landed poorly. It's like he committed stolen valor.
Man,
But there are so many little touches. Well, Rembrandt was very much like, I'm gonna die, may as well have fun. Wade, the way she frames, I guess, what also seems like giving up to me is she talks about just wanting to give up control and let what happens happens. And Wade very much sort of, I guess, reiterates this point of the sovereignty of nature, I guess you could say, and how, we shouldn't like try to force things. And maybe for Quinn, that's what he needed to hear because ultimately what Quinn was doing would fail, except things worked out without Quinn. Obviously, the if she said that to Arturo, she'd definitely be in the wrong. But when Quinn was talking about how he wished that he made sure that he got all of the kinks out of the sliding machine before they started sliding, Wade is like, part of me likes that we don't have control over this. I wanted to see all of these different worlds, and I have no regrets.
universe.
What was that?
I'm the one who wanted to take a spin around the universe.
Yeah. Wade accepts full responsibility and is like, but this is good. I don't want us to be safe. I don't want us to do this safely. Forget that. Let's just keep sliding through worlds until we encounter a meteorite holocaust. Which, Wade, I think that there would have been a better way than dragging, Professor Arturo and Rembrandt to their, what, as far as she knows, their certain death. But this is kind of I guess you could say, a separate mentality from uh, Arturo and Rembrandt. And granted, it's kind of weird. It's not that Quinn doesn't have a character in this episode, but I feel like in this particular episode, this isn't a criticism. The fact that the story is split three ways, this is kind of an inevitability. But Quinn doesn't seem as much of an agent as much as just adapting to his circumstances. It's like, oh, Wade cares about going home, so we'll go home. And it's like, oh, hey, the machine to go to other worlds is here. I should work on the machine. But Arturo, in his case, I get a lot of vanity from him, thinking I am capable of stopping something that none of the scientists in this world could have stopped. And I suppose, oh yeah, we got an instance of casual eugenics from Arturo. He does this a lot. He says to Benish that he's like, I will try to find the gene that, I swear I'll find the gene that makes you so obnoxious and isolated and destroy it. Which, Arturo, do you have to be this way?
Apparently.
Yeah, and granted, it'd be better if he has some kind of unsavory character, but yeah, I mean, he has so many. But instead of just being this perfectly brilliant man that always solves things, because he is a master in all things. Granted, theoretical physics and nuclear physics, it's not as egregious as being able to invent penicillin because you're a theoretical physicist, but this is also like, the breadth and depth of his knowledge is kind of ridiculous, but obviously it's what's necessary for the plot to happen. Um,
On that degree of that note, Wade is obnoxiously underdeveloped frequently.
mhm.
She's hinted at through the course of these series as being like really good at communicating with people and weird occult stuff. But whenever they get into many issues or places where these things are clearly real, like the most she ever is able to do is go, that's the Wiccan alphabet, and that's it.
That's fair, and it was probably a good thing that Quinn kind of stepped aside for an episode to develop the other characters, especially Wade. Uh, I guess actually there's a big plot point, and this is I guess is well, it is relevant for alternate history. I think it's also incredibly relevant for philosophically, which is it wrong to develop nuclear weapons? Or I guess because we're not even talking about nuclear weapons, nuclear power. Turo's like, even if it means saving humanity, is this something I want to unleash upon the world? The idea that some knowledge is just better off never being obtained. And I want to give you a chance to actually like say a couple of things before I comment on it.
One second, I needed to undo something. Okay. Well, I mean, what I had listed, I could go up to the relevant section in. Dang it, I lost my. There we are. What I had written down. As a general philosophical point, I feel like the episode is like, how do people react to an apocalypse? Is the general broad message. Like, if you're, and I guess more broadly, if you believe your doom is imminent, what will you try to do? Um, Wade wants to spend time. with. Arturo wants to continue to fix the situation. Rembrandt um, first goes to somebody for advice, then indulges in his hedonism, and then Wade, wait, no, Cue Ball is conflicted and tries to do multiple things until one of them fails. That is his attempt to fix everything, and then he goes on a date with Wade. Um, there's also one of the first things they see when they're still trying to figure out what this world is, if it's their world, if it's a different one. There was came across an apple that was cost $17 for one apple, and I don't know what this would necessarily say about the world. Maybe Kohi could step in for a moment after I finish. But it could be they've known about this for apparently many months already. So the world could just be like kind of winding down. Um, it's like if you're going to if you know that you're going to die in 2 months and there's nothing that can be done about it, maybe people are not doing these various like field jobs because there's a degree of, well, what's the point? So this could be there's just very few apples around, and it needs to cost this, and it air quote needs to cost this much for a person to make their money back and a little bit of profit. Or it could
And
be
I
it's
oh,
right next to this person's just being greedy. People want apples. I'm the seller of apples. They're gonna have to pay $17 to me, and because I want as much money as I can in these last few days.
if I can interject, first of all, thank you for bringing this up. I have something written down that just says inflation world, and I completely forgot what that was about. But that's what they said when they sold the $17 Apple sign.
What is this?
Now,
Inflation world?
thankfully, Sliders never has an actual inflation world because Sliders is actually pretty tame in fetish fuel, thankfully, because this would be kind of awkward to talk about. But in regards to why a single app would cost that much, it's not even necessarily a matter of who's working the fields and who's driving the apples, though these are all components. But also a matter of how are you going to pay someone to be in the store selling apples on the last day of their life?
The TV store owner, the electronics store owner, was the only employee.
Yeah, but he wasn't the one selling apples.
Well, yeah, I'm just like, it's an example. It's like, you probably, the middle of the busiest street, he probably would not be the only employee in San Francisco for this electronics store. It's probably everybody else has the day off, and the people who are like really into this getting as much money as you can thing are the ones staffing their stores.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of if I'm going to be in this field, if I'm going to be picking this apple, if I'm going to put these apples in this truck and drive them over here, and if I'm going to be standing in this at this register in the store, like each step down the line, someone's going to be like, I need to be making more money on these apples.
Yeah.
But go on, go on. That the Apple thing was an aside. You were talking about the other themes in this episode.
Doke. 1 second, going back to the where I wrote my notes because I pull up the YouTube chat when you're talking. Meter Maid Cop, as an example, is still going about her patrols as usual. So, like, how she's spending her last days, it's just doing what I normally do. Um,
Oh, I'm interrupting again. it is worth noting that there was a government announcement saying that everyone would survive. And so there's also a subset of people who do not believe that they are about to die. We just never interact with those people much. But that would probably explain why some people are fine working their jobs. Though even she doesn't go out of her way to perform an arrest when someone just tears up a ticket in front of her and, like, is just kind of defiant to her face.
Yeah, that was my next point. The electronics store owner rips the ticket up in front of her, and she's like, "You're not worth the paperwork." And he says, "How often do you get to do that in your life?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, that same guy, the one who ripped up the shop ticket, is a shopkeeper for the electronics store, and lets the group in to buy stuff, but is boarding up the windows to keep people from looting. I guess I'm not really sure how that would work because you're actively bringing people into your store to buy stuff, but you don't want people in your store?
He knows he's in an apocalyptic scenario and he has to comply with the aesthetic, or else the Apocalyptic Homeowner Association will throw a fit.
Wade and Rembrandt still having trouble coming to terms with the fact the world doesn't know or care about them identically to their Earth Prime. This is a thing that repeats over and over and over again. Rembrandt, until like season three, Rembrandt is like incredulous that this world does not know about him and does not remember him and all the good music he's made. Um,
He overstates how famous he is in his world, too.
yeah, but it's even weirder when it's worlds where maybe he doesn't even exist. And Wade is always talking about, like, I need to go see my family. It's like, they're not your family. She's like, they're my family. It's like, they have their own Wade. My family.
Wade
Um,
did say, when talking to Quinn about how she likes you control, that what she really likes about the other worlds is that she really felt a connection to all those other Wades. So clearly the way she perceives these other families and these other Wades is a little different from, your assessment.
yeah, she treats them possessively. They are hers.
Hmm.
And to a degree, it kind of seems like they don't have agency outside of what she wants to allow them. And when they express that, she gets upset, either usually just sadness. But Arturo has a similar thing, but it regards the science and physics of the various worlds. He just assumes physics works identical in every possible universe, because it could very well be that all of the scientists of the world in this world are indeed correct, and Benish is an insane person. It just happens to luck out that all of the scientists of the planet for the last, like, what, 50 years were stupid idiots who never checked Einstein's work because he was Einstein.
I would be infuriated if that was the case. If the point of divergence is physics is different, even though I know that for some of the worlds that is objectively the case.
Yeah, there's a magic world at some point, and it's like magic exists, and there's a subgroup in there who are like magic doesn't exist. You're like, but we see it, Jesus. Uh, um, Wade posits indirectly that their doppels knew about sliding and how it worked, and did it deliberately to get away from the asteroid, which nobody has reason to believe. It could very well be that either Quinn's family and the doubles went somewhere else in the world to a place that was less likely to be completely destroyed should the asteroid hit, like the least likely place that they would have effects. Granted, I don't think that's necessarily likely. Um, as well as it could be they did get off, like she said. No reason to believe that though. But there's also the third option of they time traveled, like was suggested by the cue ball of that world, because they don't get to the they he our cue ball is watching tapes of what the other Q-Well's progress was, and he never gets to. Oh, he discovered sliding in this guy's massive collection of tapes. He never gets to. They've done time travel either, but there's just no explanation for where these others went.
That's a fair point, actually. I had thought about that, but I didn't bother commenting. It's like, what if he just went to the past and got to live out his life in the 1980s and, over and over again?
Yeah, or he did go back to see the Diplodocus, or maybe he went back to the singularity.
Or maybe he's Major's masking the situation as we speak. We just don't see him running around town because town is pretty big, but solving everyone's problems, and this is just how he's living.
He's going on a quantum leap.
Every 3 days, he just loops around. That
Yeah.
would be a frustrating ending to Majora's Mask if, in one of your playthroughs, the moon situation is solved and it had nothing to do with you.
You already. I think you already addressed these. Your computer on the internet, and he responded, "It'll cost you." Again, this is kind of like the greed thing, trying to bilk people out of as much money as possible. Granted,
Mm.
I don't know what public computer or what computers were like during the 90s, but um, the asteroid that was going to impact was larger, they said, than the one that caused the death of the dinosaurs. I think Koki's looked more into the particular asteroid more than I have, but if that's the case, it's like this would not kill everybody out instantly. It'd probably kill people out, and then others would still. It would be like hundreds of years.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. This is sort of like, hey, we can obliterate the asteroid with a nuclear weapon. Clearly, they're just kind of playing around with the physics.
Yep. Arturo participates in science by stroking the ego of a world genius, that is to say, Conrad Benish. Rembrandt went to church twice, at the beginning to seek answers to what he should do, and then at the end, it sandwiches the episode with he goes to church to feed the poor and the homeless. One is one is self-serving, and the other is other serving.
Mm.
In between that goes wild parties, being beside death, nudity, godlessness, and hedonism. Um, he obviously I can't speak for a black religious experience, so I'm obviously missing important details, but
Don't worry, the writers can't either.
um, I mean, I wish I knew more about it. I did take a class on the black religious experience, but unfortunately, that was too long ago for me to recall most of it.
These are the. This is sort of like the Legion of Doom for the atheist experience.
Wait, what?
No, a YouTube channel called the Atheist Experience, where you've got a bunch of white dudes answering calls from religious people and just generally talking about atheism. And the fact that you said the black religious experience, I'm just imagining them having this counterpart that is their arch rivals.
Ah. Cop's also enjoying his time around. He's watching people dancing on cars, women dancing on cars. I can't remember if they're scantily clad or not. I'm assuming not, but maybe. A person was only in underwear in this episode. Rembrandt walks up near and similarly watches the people dancing. cop turns around and says, "What are you looking at?" and gives him the stink eye, and Rembrandt like shuffles off, which relates to the treatment of black folks in the U.S. by police, racial
Huh.
discrimination.
I didn't think that this might have been a racial thing. I just thought it was sort of like,
What if it's
don't
more of
judge
a
me. I'm just trying to have a good time, even though I'm a cop.
yeah,
But no,
it's not
you're right. It could have
necessarily a
been.
racial thing. I was able to interpret it as such.
And Rembrandt might have as well. Yeah, no, I'm not saying you're wrong. This is more, what an interesting insight you've provided. I did not even consider the fact that. I mean, I'm aware of the fact that Rembrandt is black, but I guess I didn't process that that might have been relevant to what was happening.
Hmm. Um, Only bloke who seemed to do anything kind of racist was the aforementioned cop. Everybody else seems just incredibly chill, which is a good thing. I'm not sure how this type of stuff would work in an apocalyptic scenario. I would assume some people would be like, "What's the point?" But there'd be some people would be like, "Oh boy, I can indulge in my hate-fueled desires because there's no repercussions."
We see this we see both happen in the news. They talk about Northern Ireland, which was the big conflict in the day, that Catholics and Protestants were sharing a mass because the world is going to end and they wanted to set aside things. But then between Israel and Palestine, tensions were escalating. So similarly to our protagonist, the people in general are complex and have like a range of responses.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I guess it's like what would be the general happening in the U.S. Do you think? I mean, there individuals in the entirety of it would be somewhere in between. Like inevitably in Israel and Palestine, there would be people who are like, we need to go to the religious institutions with our friends and neighbors, get along with them, be right with God. And then in Ireland, there inevitably are people who are like, fuck the Northern Irish.
So I've never lived in San Francisco. I can't tell you like how well, one, there's the aspect of TV San Francisco versus the actual San Francisco, and two, there's TV San Francisco before the apocalypse and TV San Francisco after the apocalypse. But our main point of reference is that there seems to be a prominent church. This was the most visible one that Rembrandt went to, or maybe he was inclined to go there for some other reason, that has a black pastor, but does not seem to be a specifically black church. Like there are black and white congregants shown in that church. Now, whether or not this is a product of the apocalypse or whether or not this church has always been cosmopolitan, that's not clear, but at the very least, we don't have signs. Besides that cop, which is something I hadn't considered before, that might have been what was happening. I'm inclined to say that racism wasn't really happening, but well, one, I don't live in this world to begin with, but two, I never lived in this world as a black person.
Yeah, and that cop was the only instance of, I guess, what I would say is obvious racism that I was able to see.
Yeah, I might want to watch it again. I don't know that cop's motives of whether or not that was racial, but when you say it's racial, it's like, oh, how did I not consider that this could have been racial?
I mean, it's very little, so it happens for like I think the length of time is like 2, 3 seconds, but um,
Yeah, I remember the scene. I guess I just assumed it was for a different reason.
there's a section on drinking
Yeah, it wasn't really. It's just listed among the many things people do when they are godless.
Ah. I found it
But people don't care about their health because they think they're going to die.
Yeah, I found it interesting that interdimensional travel and anti-gravity are obviously viable, but time travel, no, that's a step too far for plausibility.
Quinn says, I don't even think that time travel is possible. He didn't like outright reject it, but yeah, you're right. Considering everything that's happened, you think it'd be like, oh, maybe. But
Yeah. And then who was it? I think it was Arturo who posed the question and then summarily just didn't even think of answering it. Um, do we have the right to release the nuclear genie on an unsuspecting world?
yes, it was Arturo. That was my transition to you.
Yeah. I'm explicitly noting the question.
Yeah, I wanted your thoughts.
Um, I mean, I don't necessarily know. They bring up a number of good points. You could use it in this case to save the world, which I'm like, that seems like a reasonable thing, I guess. Good reason to use it. And Arturo is complaining about, well, people using it as weapons of war, which Conrad Banish kind of seems he wants to do. He's like, nobody's gonna argue with us. We have the atomic bomb.
Yeah,
Which is a bad side. Conrad Banish is also like, we could have nuclear energy. It would be pennies, electricity for everyone. And then Arturo's like, well, what do you do with the nuclear waste? And Banish is like, well, you just bury it or throw it into the sun or something. It's like, yes, and a thing explodes or there's a malfunction, then you just rain nuclear material down on the world or poison the water supplies. And it's like, I don't know enough about nuclear activities to give a good to have a good position on it.
so I mean, this clearly reflects a lot of the anxieties people had about nuclear power in the 90s, and a lot of these anxieties are still present. Uh, you know, I'm using propaganda as a neutral term here, but this very much does seem like anti nuclear propaganda. And admittedly, from where they were in the 90s, they may not have some of the assurances that we have now because largely we have much better ways of containing nuclear waste in cement and stuff that, just generally will never be a threat to anyone. And even the idea that people will arbitrarily use nuclear weapons to enforce their will, in this case, making sure everyone adopts nuclear power, that never actually materialized. Now, granted, Benish was just kind of spitballing ideas before he actually developed any of this stuff. He was kind of aware that nuclear waste would be a thing, but
And nobody's
I'd
had to
like to
consider
believe.
this before.
Hmm?
Nobody's had to consider this before either.
Yeah, so if this world is like our world, ultimately, these problems, I'm not going to say they're fully solved themselves, but the nuclear waste problem isn't really the problem it is that it was thought to be in the 90s. I'm not saying that nuclear power plants shouldn't be more responsible and that there's still room for growth, but I think largely the anxieties being expressed there have mostly been resolved. That being said, this is a timeline where it was government owned, highly regulated technology, whereas in this alternate world, Benish is going to hold a patent on it. And even though I'd like to think that the government will step in and regulate things, I suppose it's an open question as to whether or not Benish will handle nuclear energy as responsible as people have handled it in our world.
Yeah, and given his statements of we can do anything, nobody would be able to oppose us. I'm inclined to say he wouldn't do better.
I mean, this is someone that's just sort of spitballing at the moment. You know, I feel like even if a lot of people would be like, yeah, I'll nuke anyone who disagrees, when they're actually doing like the logistical planning of nuking someone, now granted, you might have figures like Oppenheimer where it's like, well, we've gone this far, it'd be a shame to turn back. I think most people would come to their senses and be like, no, what am I doing?
What is wrong with me?
Yeah. Hey.
Um,
Is there anything else? Finish everything you've got to say before.
I've written down most of the stuff. It's like, what hasn't Professor Arturo studied? Is he a science specialist that is on theoretical physics, or does he just know everything about all of science? I'm clearly talking somewhat rhetorically because he does just seem to know everything about all of the sciences.
He majored in the plot needs of the 1990 show Sliders. That was his what he took in college, and so he learned everything that helped him master whatever the plot needs in the show Sliders.
Wow. um, 100 million, and they said that there would be no new life on the world for 100 million years if
No major life
yeah,
forms.
okay, no major life form. That's what I meant. For 100 million years if they were wrong, and the weapon did not stop the bomb, or the bomb did not stop the asteroid, or if they've just failed at creating it correctly because they really only have one shot at it. Um, Whereas I find it a degree of questionable. It's a really long time for no dominant life. Dinosaurs uh, went from dinosaurs to mammals in 100 million years, or in less than 100 million years, even if we assume there were no other dominant creatures the entire time.
Yeah, I this is a larger asteroid, but I don't know where he got that number from.
Yeah, my assumption is he was just pulling it out of nowhere for maybe rhetorical effect.
But you don't understand, Silent. He majored in the plot needs of this show, so of course he knows the exact number, how long it would be.
Is time travel possible? Obviously, forward time travel is possible due to the fact that we're doing it now. I don't believe there's, at least that we know of anymore, any reason to doubt the possibility of reverse time travel. It's just nowhere close to viable, and probably will not be for the any foreseeable length of time. And by foreseeable, I mean, you know, I don't know, just an obscenely long time. Maybe even we'll never be able to get it, but it is at least theoretically possible.
Smarter people than me have argued that it's not possible, but I don't feel qualified to say one way or the other.
Wade is more interested in talking about feelings than trying to get off the planet that's about to be destroyed when they are literally the only people who have a viable way to stop it. She's like, Quinn, we need to talk about our feelings and how it makes us feel. And Quinn's like, fine, give me 30 minutes. I'm gonna try to save our lives first.
You know, I wouldn't mind if this actually resulted in closure on their weird relationship plotline, but the fact that it just reverts at the after the episode is just uh,
Yep. He accepts her proposal for talking about their feelings only when he has failed to make a new device and just destroyed the electricity of his house. He does that periodically. The Irish Catholics, Protestants share a peace. Bosnia and Herzegovina are sharing peace. Israel continues killing Palestinians even when the world's about to end. Wade feels connected to all the other Wades. They are all her. She reveals indirectly that she's into mysticism at this point. I think I look up had listed but forgot to do benefits of nuclear power, drawbacks of nuclear waste. Parentheses. Koki, remind me to look into this later before we record. Too late for that.
well, I did look into it a little bit, and I'm inclined to say that while the anxieties that Arturo had were appropriate for the 90s, largely these things haven't materialized. There hasn't been like that many instances of like catastrophic like bad waste disposal, and waste disposal technology has gotten a lot better. Now people can list a couple of reactor failures. Uh, it's really overblown, basically. And I don't want to like constantly toot, "Hey, nuclear power is the greatest thing ever forever," and I want a radiator in my oven so I can just constantly feel its warm glow. But I think largely nuclear energy turns out to be pretty good. It's not the only solution to our problems, but it's definitely a viable, one of the prongs in our multi-pronged attempt to meet our energy needs without destroying the planet.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fan of it, but and would prefer more, the renewables like wind and solar. I mean, there's probably going to be people who jump in and like it's technically renewable, and I'm gonna say I technically don't care. I feel like wind power, solar power, maybe even um, ocean current would be better to have our focus on, which is what we're focusing on presently. So I find that to be a good one. But these I don't think were viable options given the technology they had, or given the technology that was had in the 90s. Granted, again, I'm not the history person, but I mean, I guess technically my immediate my desire for the usage of electricity is people should just use significantly less of it. Um, I think I've been on record as like I don't. I guess my initial phrase. I don't like lights. The more nuance to it, I want lights to be used significantly less. I would like them to be turned off if people are not actively using them. So like you go out of the living room, just turn the light off. You're no longer using the kitchen stove. You can turn that light off. I don't, but having many lights on seemingly 24/7 is a bit much, causes severe light pollution. Um, Even street lights, they can also be directional. So I'm not opposed to street lights. I just would like them to be more directional, like focused downward and not like just a glow. I would like to be able to actually see the night sky fairly well, and not just go, oh, I can see, a couple of the major stars. I want to look up and go, ooh, the Milky Way. Um, but yeah, the people could stand. Obviously, I think we know who the vague groups I'm talking about when I say people. People could stand to use significantly less electricity. Um,
Why would you say that about the Senegalese?
you could stand to something like I don't know, get off of YouTube and go talk with your neighbors and okay, go back. Nuclear weapons are an existential threat, especially when in the hands of power-hungry maniacs who act like spoiled children. This is a response to Benish's statements about nobody will.
Hold your spot. I want to interject on your earlier point, and I wholeheartedly agree that reducing our energy usage is also an important prong in our multi pronged approach to our energy and environmental concerns.
It's probably the most. If we don't use as much energy, we're not going to need to, be able to produce more. Um, so like AI sucks in this regard. Um, but what was there? I was just thinking of a thing. But so yeah, the reducing of it makes it better. There was a news story I had read that something like after a decade of use, there was fears that solar power or solar panels would have to be demolished, and they would only have like a decade of use, and then you have to redo it, and we're not going to have enough metals to be able to keep up with the demand, especially long term. But solar panels have recently been shown to have like 85% of their original energy storage and creation capabilities even after a decade. So they're a lot. They're not immortal. No technology is capable of being immortal, but they are a lot more durable than critics give it credit for. You have anything to add for that, or
Well, I guess
because
my first thought is like, and there's a sense that renewable isn't also entirely renewable, but obviously we need to handle things as they come, be it the demand for rare earth metals. And there are people who are coming up with solutions, people smarter than me that, you know, will make this kind of thing even more sustainable. But the point is that a lot of the problems we thought we would have with solar power, are not problems. Have you reached the end of your notes? I have something that I kind of want to say for the very end of this.
yeah, I had not. I am reminded as well of who was it? Some right wing crazy person who's like, solar is not a renewable is not an infinitely renewable energy because someday the sun's going to go out. It's like, yeah, you're an idiot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in this case, I'm talking about the metals for the solar panels, but
No,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I was just
Uh,
reminded of that, and I wanted to say that this is a counterpoint some critics put forth, and and anybody who puts it forth is intentionally misunderstanding the points.
no energy is ever renewable because the second law of thermodynamics.
Continuing on my notes, Arturo steals a piece of the schematics after Benish threatens dictatorial control over the world uh, in order to spare the planet from the ills of nuclear weaponry. That is, he steals it back because he's like, maybe I don't want to unleash nuclear weapons slow it down. So hopefully, maybe you don't have dictators threatening people with nuclear annihilation. But Benish does steal the schematic back at the end of the episode, so the fate of this world is completely unknown.
Yeah. I suppose this kind of ties into the question that I want to ask at the end of every session. But is that have you reached the end?
No, no, I'm still going through the whole timeline.
Okay, sorry. I'll shut up. Just
Yeah,
transition to me when you're
we'll
ready.
get to the end. Rembrandt gets back into the joys of singing and entertaining, which is his life's seemingly eternal goal. That he actually gets joy out of giving joy. Um, while he can get momentary satisfaction out of indulgence of his vices, his longer term satisfaction is entertaining. Um, so in the party, he is before he goes to the Russian roulette room. He starts playing on the piano and singing, um, and then this goes as well into feeding the homeless or the poor, whichever, at the church at the end of the episode. He seems mostly content with his life and actions when he's helping others, which is, a general human thing. People like helping. It makes people feel satisfied. Um, the internet has egregiously ruined it in that when there's complete anonymity, people are more likely to help when they think they can cause issues for others. But without the anonymity, people just having community, people really want to help their community. Um, Russian roulette is taking life into their own hands. Um, yeah, we've already talked about this part, so I'm going to skip it. Arturo barges in on cue ball and Wade being romantic, seemingly oblivious, or he just doesn't care. Most likely the latter. Science doesn't really seem to care about romance.
Food. He just like no. Admittedly, he's been like frantically working on this nuclear bomb for like over a day.
Yeah. It's not that it's unreasonable. It's just was interesting and wanted to note it. Uh, Moral responsibility of nuclear weaponry. I think we've already established that nuclear weapons suck. Crowds in Times Square are about to watch the ball drop until the ball drops and kills them.
Yeah, that was funny. Yes.
Um, Professor Arturo continues to be sensitive about his weight. Benish comes out and they're talking about, hey, is it happening yet? And he's like, no. And he's like, what was it? Fat man, fat boy. I can't remember.
Fat Boy is the bomb in this universe.
It's like, fat boy. And then Arturo's like, fat boy's the name of the bomb in case you had other ideas
Hmm.
to cue ball and Wade. Genius comes in all sorts of shape and sizes. Uh, in reference to Wade being like, wait, this guy's gonna save the world? So you shouldn't count people as idiots just because they look different. Uh, this guy's an extreme. Well, he's not really a hippie. He just has a kind of a hippie vibe,
He's a
and
metalhead.
he's like, yeah, it's this guy. He's weird and crazy, but he's also the greatest possible person for this. Um, Obviously, you need to give people appropriate education and chances for them to be geniuses, but anybody is capable of being almost anything. soup kitchen with the wife of the rich guy. Uh, the what was the name? The preacher quote: "Only by helping others do we understand the meaning of personal salvation." He wants to go. Rembrandt wants to go spend time with his friends, family. It's important, but so is helping others, more so than selfish and hedonistic indulgences. Arturo proposes eugenics as good, at least in a humorous way, because Benish annoys him, which is your aforementioned, "I will find the gene that makes you so annoying and destroy it." He mentions eugenics significantly more, so even if we can chalk it up to, oh, it could just be him being humorous in this episode, it's the start of establishing a pattern anyway. Many of the people of Beverly Hills sold all their properties to one guy for exceptionally cheap because they thought the world was ending, and you want some extra cash to be able to do literally anything you want. But
Afford some apples.
um, but they're suing because they want it all back since the world didn't end, and it's like I guess I'll go back to that one before.
The government told them it wasn't going to end. They should have listened to the government.
Benish continued to be opposed to the establishment. This is a pattern with his character. There's several instances of characters who are basically consistent throughout the series. There is a Pavel Yurichenko is a taxi driver in every multiverse. Cue Ball is a theoretical physics genius throughout the multiverse. Um, Wade doesn't get explored much throughout the multiverse. Banish is anti whatever most people are in the world. That's not to say he's necessarily anti-establishment, but because there's an episode where he's all in favor of the establishment, but most of the people of that world are anti what the government is up to. Um, and the show ends with their episode ends with zoom in on the four color Einstein or an Einstein poster. It has four of the images of Einstein where he's sticking his tongue out. They're different colors. God does not play dice with the universe, so it's like things aren't left up to chance. I don't actually know what the extent of that actual quote is meant as, but
Einstein was a determinist. That's kind of the thing. He didn't like the idea of quantum randomness.
and then my question that I said I would get back to, uh, if you give somebody something under a particular expectation, and the expectation does not come to fruition, uh, do you deserve the thing you gave back or gave them back? Specifically, in this case, it's in the note of people in Beverly Hills selling their house because they thought the world was going to end, but then it doesn't. Like if a person promises, or if it's like would be written into a contract that if the world doesn't end, they can have it back, and if he later said, "Nah, I'm keeping it," then it's like, yeah, he would. I feel like his suing would be deserved, but if they sold it because they just wanted, as noted, like the extra spending money or something,
Or the
and
apples.
and he's like, "No, I don't feel like selling all of these houses, every house in Beverly Hills." And they sue him. I feel like it's their own fault. They should have, understood that selling your house means your house no longer belongs to you, and you can't guarantee the future.
I mean, if Quinn and Wade get to take see backsies, their relationship growth, I can hardly complain about people in Beverly Hills take see backseeing their houses.
Yeah, I'm not talking about like as a artificial show decision. I'm thinking about this and do you have thoughts on it in a like real world implications of what this could be trying to convey, but as an example.
I mean, what this is more than anything, it's an example of market speculation, right? And I get the impression that the creator is not a fan of market speculation. You know, it's in this case, a bunch of rich people are the victims, so we're not as sympathetic towards them. But the point is, this guy, he bet against the world being destroyed, not out of any sense of hope for humanity, but hope for becoming filthy rich. Because if the world isn't destroyed, he just made a lot of money. And the fact that wealth is oftentimes concentrated in such a way, I think, is the real problem here. I'm not saying that. I mean, obviously, we have a concept of someone under certain circumstances is not of the sound mind to make a certain decision. But I think these people were rationally making this decision based on the information they had available to them, and they were just wrong. I don't think they would win this court case. Now, whether or not people should be insured somehow with some kind of safety net for these kinds of bad judgment calls, these bad financial decisions, that's a conversation to be had. We don't feel that strongly about these people though because they're rich, right? So, haha, you just lost your multi-million dollar house.
Well, there's the question as well of not would they win this court case, but should they win this court case?
Yeah, this is kind of, this is more of a visceral feeling I have. It's like for the common person that sold everything. I guess this is actually relevant to the Harold Camping people, for example. They destroyed their lives. And I think that being financially disenfranchised and made into poverty because you believed the world was going to end and you sold your property in your home is only going to vertically radicalize people. And this is kind of a threat to our kind of civic society, even though, we have notions of personal responsibility. It's like, well, they made this decision. It's their problem. Obviously, in cases like this, for like your average Joe losing everything, they will make it our problem. In the case of a multi-millionaire losing everything, it's just kind of like hard to feel sympathetic for them. And, if we're talking about independently of legally, if we're just talking about my values, that's generally how I feel. If we're talking about legally and rule of law, then, that's an aside.
Yeah.
I don't feel bad for these rich people. One, because they don't exist because this is a fictional show, but two, they are framed as, idle rich people that lost their homes on speculation.
Yeah. And that was actually the last of what I had.
You didn't bring up how it was gay.
Wait, what?
When Arturo realizes that Benish is,
Oh, right. Arturo realizes that Benish is onto something based on Arturo's preconceived notions of science. He's like, "You and I, Mr. Benish, are going to be spending a lot of time together." And Benish is like, "Whoa, whoa, I have a girlfriend, dude."
yeah, which, as far as responses, It's not bad. It's not that different from Rembrandt's response. Maybe it's a little more over the top, but this is also I'm gonna be putting it out there. If Quinn made an advance towards me, I'd have a different reaction from if Otero made an advance towards me.
Yeah. Alternatively, though, however, is their delivery even if the contents of it are identical, the method of delivery is the relevant factor. The Benish's reaction was like to hold up his hands and back away and go, "Whoa, no!" Whereas Rembrandt's reaction when being offered the earring was to just like look at it and go, "No, I don't really swing that way," or whatever his statement was. One was like taken aback and upset about it, whereas the other was just kind of like it's just like a morally neutral. I'm not gay.
I mean, I think it's also a matter of the delivery of how the Q, you know, unintentionally made this advance versus how Arturo unintentionally made this advance too. That I think the hands up in the air to someone saying we're going to be spending a lot of time together uh, might be a bit more justified as opposed to this guy being a bit more subtle saying take this earring. Uh, but yeah, there's also the fact that while I'm not attracted to either of them, I would consider Quinn to be considerably more attractive than Oturo. And so I could also see like the different reactions. I'm not saying that. Well, I mean, to be honest, neither of them handled it well. They could have like just asked for the actual context and understood the situation. But I mean, in both cases, you know, it wasn't the worst response. Like the homophobia is not terrible.
Yeah. But you said you had
So
another question.
it is the question I ask about every world, and that is, should I stay or should I go? Now, I think that there is certainly reason to believe that if I stay, there will be trouble. Arturo doesn't know this. The people who are sliding don't know this, but Benish did find the schematics, right? He is going to create this sort of nuclear world, and while it is possible that this world can come to the same solutions more or less that we did, it's also possible that, given the circumstances of how it was developed, this would be a much more unilateral nuclear world, right? It would be a while before there'd be other countries that develop nukes, that there could be mutually assured destruction. Not that that's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying it's a different course of history. The amount of government regulation might be different, considering the government had considerably less to do with the development of this nuclear weapon. Uh, and the fact of the matter is that Benish knows that Arturo tried to betray him. So on camp, if I go or if I stay, there will be trouble. I think that more or less assesses it. I don't know if you have any more thoughts on why they should go, besides it advances the plot.
I mean, your additional statement that you do, if this is going to be a thing you do frequently, it's also a fairly safe world for them to do their work in.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have the time constraints or the social time or social or whatever constraints, so they could just work on the device, fixing it, figuring out how to get back.
Yeah. I'm inclined to say that if they go, it will be double. I mean, obviously, there's the chance that the next world could be their world, and I can understand why they might want to just slide. But the fact is that Quinn found a machine that he thought was pretty close to being the machine. And yes, he fried the electronics, and maybe he destroyed.
At least twice, probably more often.
He what at least twice? I'm sorry.
He destroyed the machine at home at his Earth Prime multiple times, at least twice, probably more often.
Yeah, and even if he like fried the internals of this machine, like that it would take a year to repair, it's still better than making it from scratch. And in my opinion, it's still better than jumping from world to world and praying for the best. So I'm inclined to say that if we were the ones sliding, it'd be like, okay, if I don't go into the portal, we're stuck here for 39 years. There are worse places to be stuck for 39 years or sooner if I can get this machine going. Of course, I'm not a theoretical physicist. I can't make this machine, so we would be stuck here for 39 years and probably die in Benish's nuclear holocaust.
I would be inclined to continue,
Mm.
continue sliding. Granted, I fall more onto the Wade side of this spectrum. I just kind of want to see what else is out there. It's like,
I
what if
mean,
the other things out there can kill me? And
it's
I'd be like, well, then I would die in a unique scenario.
I feel like you can still do that. You just have to wait. I mean, a while, probably not 39 years, but obviously that's assuming we could fix the machine, which objectively we can't because this is not existing technology. And even if it was, we wouldn't be the kind of people that could do it. But if we were Quinn and Rembrandt,
Yeah, I mean, if we were Quinn and Rembrandt, I kind of think we'd just do what they did because that's what they did. But
that's true. Maybe I shouldn't be challenging his expertise, right? If he thought, hey, I could get this working fast enough, then, who am I, a non theoretical physicist, to say that actually, I think, well, nah, I'd win.
yeah, I would. But so. Those are the majority of my thoughts on there.
Okay, well, okay. So in this case, we are split. I think that's valid, and I have a feeling this is going to be a recurring thing. But I want to thank everyone who watches the VOD. I don't know if anyone's with us right now, but
I don't see any comments. I don't know if anybody's here, but nobody's said anything. Normally, if there's at least one person, they'd probably say hi. I would hope. If you're here, say hi. But
I'm going to make an acknowledgement that this was made on the land of the Indiana band of the Miami. And I'm going to wish everyone a good time.
the Illinois.
Oh, and the Illinois, yes. Uh,
I'll just
and
before we go, we also have. What do you think Puerto Rico is like in this world?
oh yeah, that's a bit we had in the episodes. Um, I can't imagine it being that much different. I mean, you
How would they
know,
handle the reaction? What would Puerto
no,
Rico's reaction be to "You're all going to die"?
I mean, when I say I don't think it would be that different. I mean, I don't think it would be that different from San Francisco, right? There's a subset of Puerto Ricans that are credulous, that will believe the government, or believe that God will save them, or that if the meteorite comes, it's a good thing because it's the will of God. And there's going to be a subset of people that are not going to believe the government, believe they're all going to die, and do the same things like I think, I mean, the fact that we see the world sort of having these different responses, these mirrored responses that are oftentimes hard to predict, it kind of captures. where Puerto Rico would fall in this too. It is hard to predict ultimately which would win out. Uh, I will say, I remember before, I think it was Maria. I think it was after Irma and before Maria. People were gathered by the beaches and praying, firmly believing that God would save them. And so I'm not sure. Puerto Ricans are also very prone to conspiratorial thinking, though. I think that people oftentimes underestimate how many Puerto Ricans just casually believe in conspiracy theories, and so it's kind of a mixed bag. I like in the case of San Francisco, we mostly see one side of it: people who don't believe the government, who don't trust God, and think we're all gonna die. And granted, some of the people who trust God also think we're all gonna die. Um, but I think that both San Francisco and Puerto Rico are gonna have a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. And with that, I guess have a good time.
Have fun. I just need to figure out how to stop the recording because this is the first time we're streaming in forever.
Yeah, and I did it last time.